Have you ever taken a late-night bus or train ride when the world outside the windows is nothing but darkness, and the only sounds are the soft hum of the engine and the occasional creak of the seats? Those quiet rides can feel strangely comforting or deeply unsettling, because sometimes you're not as alone as you think. Tonight's story is about a passenger who appears out of nowhere, takes a seat beside you, and then simply disappears. Some call it an urban legend. Others swear it happened to them. But one thing's for certain: once you hear this tale, you may never look at your fellow travelers the same way again. It was a rainy autumn evening when I boarded the last bus out of town. The streets were slick with water, neon lights from shop windows shimmering in the puddles. The air was cold enough to bite, and I was grateful to escape into the warmth of the half-empty bus. The driver nodded at me but said nothing as I paid my fare and slipped into a seat halfway down the aisle. The bus lurched forward, its headlights cutting through sheets of rain. Outside, the town faded quickly into shadow, the glow of street lamps growing sparse as we headed toward the highway. I settled in, pulling my jacket tighter, the rhythmic sound of the windshield wipers lulling me into a half-dreaming state. There were only a handful of passengers, an older woman near the front, dozing with her head against the glass, a man in a dark coat sitting 2 rows behind me, staring out into the night, and one seat directly across the aisle from me, completely empty until it wasn't. At first, I thought I had imagined it. One moment, the seat was bare, and the next, there was someone sitting there, a young woman, pale and thin, her hair damp, as though she had been caught in the rain. She didn't look at me. She didn't even seem to notice I was there. She sat very still, hands folded neatly in her lap, her gaze fixed straight ahead. I blinked, trying to remember if I had seen her board. Had she slipped on quietly at the last stop? Had she been there all along, and I just hadn't noticed? Something about her presence unsettled me, though I couldn't say why. Perhaps it was how silent she was. No shifting in her seat, no sigh, no cough, not even the sound of her breathing. The bus continued down the dark highway, rain hammering against the windows. I glanced at the driver, wondering if he had noticed her too, but he kept his eyes firmly on the road. When I looked back, the woman's head had turned ever so slightly. She was staring out the window now, though there was nothing to see but darkness and the reflection of the interior lights. Minutes passed in uneasy silence, and then, without warning, she turned her head fully toward me. Her eyes were dark, so dark I couldn't see where the iris ended and the pupil began. She didn't blink. She just looked at me, as though she had been waiting for me to notice her. I tried to hold her gaze, but something in the depth of her eyes made my stomach twist. They weren't angry or sad. They were empty, completely, utterly empty. And then, just as suddenly as she had appeared, she was gone. The seat across from me was empty once more. Continue. I sat frozen, my eyes locked on the empty seat across the aisle. My mind raced, trying to make sense of what I had just witnessed. People don't simply appear and disappear like that. I told myself I must have dozed off for a moment, half dreaming, and my imagination had filled in the blanks. But no, my heart was pounding too fast for sleep. I had seen her. I was certain of it. I glanced around the bus, hoping for some sign that someone else had noticed. The older woman near the front still slept, her head bobbing gently with the motion of the ride. The man in the dark coat behind me hadn't moved, his gaze still fixed on the rain-slicked window. If he had seen anything, he gave no sign. I turned back to the aisle, empty, just cracked vinyl, lit by the faint yellow glow of the overhead lights. The silence pressed down on me, broken only by the hum of the engine and the steady rhythm of the windshield wipers. I tried to shake it off, telling myself it was nothing more than fatigue, a trick of the light. But the longer I sat there, the harder it was to convince myself, because I could still feel it. The weight of her stare, heavy and unyielding, lingering, even though she was gone. As the bus rolled on, I noticed something strange. The window beside the empty seat was wet, fogged with condensation, and on the glass, faint but visible, was the shape of a handprint, small, delicate, fresh. My breath caught. I leaned forward, staring at it. I hadn't imagined her. She had been there. A chill ran down my spine. I looked toward the driver again, but his posture remained stiff and focused, his eyes never leaving the road. The dim glow of the dashboard lights outlined his face, but it was expressionless, almost blank. I swallowed hard and shifted in my seat. Maybe she had slipped away quietly, moving to another row without me noticing. I scanned the bus again, eyes darting from one seat to another, but the passengers hadn't changed. The older woman slept. The man stared. No one else had appeared. Rain lashed harder against the windows, and the bus shuddered as it took a sharp turn off the main road. I frowned, realizing I didn't recognize this route. The road was narrower, lined with tall trees that swayed in the storm. Had I missed an announcement, a detour? I leaned into the aisle, craning my neck toward the front, but the driver said nothing. That's when I felt it, a subtle shift in the air, like someone moving nearby. I froze, every muscle tense. Slowly, I turned my head, and there she was again. Not across the aisle this time, not in another row. She was sitting directly beside me. Her pale face was inches from mine. Her dark, empty eyes locked on me with an intensity that made my skin crawl. I hadn't heard her move. I hadn't felt the cushion of the seat shift. She was simply there, silent and unblinking. I opened my mouth to speak, to ask who she was, but no sound came out. My throat was dry, my tongue heavy. All I could do was stare back, caught in her gaze like an insect pinned under glass. The bus hit a bump, jolting me out of the trance. I blinked, and just like before, she was gone. The seat beside me was empty, as though she had never been there at all. But this time, there was no denying it. I wasn't imagining things. She was real, and she wanted me to see her. I pressed my palms into the seat cushion, trying to steady my breath. My pulse thudded in my ears, and every nerve screamed for me to pull the cord, to tell the driver to stop the bus and let me out. But I didn't move. Somehow, I knew the driver wouldn't stop, even if I begged. I looked down the aisle again. The older woman near the front hadn't stirred. Her head still rested against the glass, lips parted slightly, as though she were lost in some endless dream. But something about her posture was wrong. Too still, too perfect, almost like a mannequin posed in sleep. My gaze shifted to the man in the dark coat, 2 rows behind me. He hadn't changed either, still staring out the window, still motionless, as if glued in place. I realized I hadn't seen him blink since I boarded the bus. A cold realization crept over me. None of them had reacted. Not once. Not to me. Not to her. Not to anything. It was as if I were the only passenger alive. I swallowed hard and leaned into the aisle, my voice cracking as I spoke. Driver. The man at the wheel didn't respond. His shoulders were rigid, his hands locked on the steering wheel. The faint green glow of the dashboard lights illuminated his face, and for the first time, I noticed how pale it was, almost waxen. Driver, I said louder, my voice echoing through the hollow bus. Where are we going? The windshield wipers thudded rhythmically, pushing aside sheets of rain. But the driver never turned his head, never shifted his gaze. He just drove on, the engine humming like a lullaby from some forgotten place. My throat tightened. I was alone with her. A flash of lightning lit up the road ahead, illuminating the trees that lined the highway. And for a split second, I saw her again, standing outside the window, in the rain-soaked forest, matching the speed of the bus. Her hair whipped wildly in the wind, her face pale, her empty eyes locked on mine. The light faded, plunging the bus back into dim yellow glow. My breath caught in my chest. She couldn't have been there, not outside, not keeping pace with us. But when the lightning flashed again, she was closer, her hands pressed flat against the glass, her lips moving silently. I recoiled, pressing myself into the seat. The glass fogged where her hands touched, leaving behind damp streaks that lingered long after the image of her face faded. The whispers started then, faint at first, like the sound of static on a radio. They filled the aisle, surrounding me, slipping into my ears. Words I couldn't understand, repeated over and over, overlapping until they became unbearable. I stumbled to my feet, clutching the seat back for balance. "Stop the bus," I shouted, my voice cracked, raw with fear. This time, the driver moved. His head turned slowly, unnaturally, until I could see his face reflected in the rearview mirror. His eyes were just like hers, dark, empty, hollow. He smiled faintly, a thin curve of lips that never reached his expressionless eyes. The whispers grew louder, filling every corner of the bus. I spun around, desperate for another passenger to react, to prove I wasn't trapped in some nightmare. But the woman at the front never stirred. The man in the coat never blinked. They weren't passengers at all. They were shadows, placeholders. And in that moment, I understood. This wasn't just a bus ride. This was a passage, a journey not meant for the living. The vanishing passenger wasn't the stranger. It was me. The realization sank into me like ice. This bus wasn't taking me home. It wasn't even taking me anywhere I could recognize. It was a vessel, a passage to somewhere else entirely. And I was trapped aboard. The hum of the engine grew louder, almost like a chant, each vibration sinking deeper into my bones. The whispers filled the air, weaving in and out of each other, some sharp, some soft, all pulling me toward the truth I didn't want to face. And then she was there again, not across from me, not beside me, but standing in the aisle, just a few feet away. Her pale dress hung heavy with water, dripping onto the floor in steady droplets. Her hair clung to her face in damp strands, but her eyes, those endless, hollow eyes, stared at me with an intensity that froze me in place. She didn't move. She didn't need to. The weight of her gaze pressed down on me like a physical force. The bus shuddered, as if reacting to her presence. The lights flickered, and for a split second, the other passengers vanished. The older woman, the man in the coat, gone. Only empty seats remain, rows upon rows, stretching back into shadows. And then the lights steadied, and they were there again, unmoving, like puppets waiting for their strings. The vanishing passenger tilted her head slightly, her lips parting. For the first time, I heard her voice. Not a whisper, not inside my head, but spoken aloud. "You shouldn't be here." The words were soft, but they struck me harder than any scream. My mouth went dry, my body trembled, but I forced the question out anyway. Then, "Why am I here?" Her expression didn't change, but her voice wove through the whispers, stronger now. "You boarded, you paid your fare, you took your seat. This is the last bus. Once you ride, you can't get off." My chest tightened. I tried to deny it, to tell myself I had stepped onto nothing more than an ordinary bus on an ordinary night. But deep down, I knew she was right. This wasn't ordinary. This wasn't human. The driver's hollow eyes glimmered faintly in the rearview mirror. His hands never left the wheel, but I could feel his attention on me. The bus lurched, speeding faster, the trees outside blurring into streaks of shadow. We weren't on any road I recognized. We weren't on a road at all. I clutched the edge of the seat, desperation clawing at me. How do I get out? My voice cracked, raw. The woman's eyes softened, just barely. Some vanish quietly, some fight until the end. But once you've been seen, you belong here. Her words pressed into me like a verdict. The whispers rose, echoing the same phrase over and over. "You belong here. You belong here." "No," I whispered, shaking my head, though my voice carried no strength. "No, I don't." The bus jolted violently, throwing me against the aisle. The lights flickered again, and when they steadied, she was gone. I staggered to my feet, heart hammering, and looked around desperately. Empty. Every seat was empty now. No woman, no man, no driver, just me. The engine still roared. The bus still sped through the darkness. But I was alone, and yet not alone. Because from the seat across the aisle, the seat where she had first appeared, I saw it. A damp handprint spreading across the window, fresh, as if pressed there only seconds ago. The whispers hushed, replaced by a single, steady voice. Hers. "You're the passenger now." The bus rattled on, the sound of the engine echoing through the hollow space. My breath came in short bursts as I stared at the handprint on the window. It lingered there, damp and unmistakably real. Though the seat beside it was empty, I pressed my palms into my knees, trying to ground myself. But the truth was undeniable. She wasn't gone. She never vanished. She was always here. I stood unsteadily, clutching the back of a seat for balance. "Stop," I shouted, my voice cracking in the emptiness. "Let me out." But the driver's seat was vacant now, the wheel spinning on its own as the bus barreled forward through a road that shouldn't exist. The windshield no longer showed rain or trees. It showed nothing at all, just a tunnel of darkness stretching forever. I stumbled toward the front, desperate to find some way off. My reflection flashed in the windows, pale and wide-eyed, but even that didn't feel right. My reflection's lips moved differently, whispering words I couldn't hear. I turned away, heart pounding. The whispers returned, soft and steady, like a tide rising around me. They no longer sounded like dozens of voices. They sounded like one, hers. "You've seen me," she said, though her mouth never moved. "You've heard me, and now you ride with me." I closed my eyes, gripping the cold metal pole near the driver's seat. "I don't belong here." Silence followed. Then, a faint laugh. Sad, hollow, echoing through the bus, like wind in a cave. None of us did. The lights flickered again. The seats behind me filled, not with people, but with shadows, outlines of passengers, hazy and faint, their heads tilted downward, their bodies swaying with the motion of the bus. Dozens of them, all silent, all watching. I turned, panic clawing at me. But there was nowhere to run. The aisle stretched endlessly in both directions, rows of shadowed faces locking me in. The hum of the engine deepened, vibrating in my chest until it felt like part of me. And then I understood. The bus never stopped. It never had a destination. It was the destination, a ride for the lost, for the forgotten, for those who boarded without knowing the cost. The vanishing passenger wasn't a stranger haunting me. She was showing me what I had become. When I opened my eyes again, she was seated across the aisle, just as she had been at the start, or pale, silent, unmoving, watching me, waiting for me to accept it. And in that quiet, I realized something chilling. Someday, another late-night traveler would board this bus. They'd look around, see the dim lights, the empty seats, and maybe, just maybe, they'd see me sitting there. The hum of the engine lulled me into a strange calm. The fear was still there, but softer now, smoothed by resignation. I sat back down in my seat, the whispers folding around me like a blanket. And as the bus rolled deeper into the dark, I understood why no one ever saw her leave. Because she never did. And neither would I. Now, as you lay in bed, listening to this story, think about the last time you took a bus or train late at night. Think about the passengers you saw, or the ones you didn't. Think about the way reflections shift in the window, when you're tired, when the lights flicker, when the night outside grows too quiet. If you ever feel a stranger's eyes on you, if you ever notice a seat that seems empty but somehow isn't, don't look too closely. And whatever you do, don't follow them when they vanish, because some rides don't end where you expect. If this story kept you awake just a little longer, or gave you chills before you drift into sleep, make sure you subscribe to this channel right now. Hit the notification bell so you don't miss the next tale in our series of haunted late-night journeys. Every week, we'll explore a new story, another midnight road, another forgotten place, another whisper waiting in the dark. And if you're ready for more, don't stop here. The next video in this series is already waiting for you. Just click, and you'll step onto another path, another story to fall asleep to. If you can, thank you for watching. Sleep well, traveler. And remember, sometimes the scariest part of the ride isn't who sits beside you, but who disappears when no one else is looking.